Welcome back to another episode of Fancastic, where we are talking about conveying CAS value. Big deal out in the profession. We know CAS teams are brilliant at making messy finances nice and clean, and they're also brilliant at making that look effortless. And that is a problem because when it looks easy, clients can miss the value. And nobody knows this better than Triantos. So today we're going to talk about how to define, demonstrate, and document CAS value so clients can see it, they can feel it, and most importantly, they gladly pay for it. That's the part we love. So, Christine, what do you think about this topic? We're going to jump right into it.
Yeah, I love this topic because we just said, in a recent podcast, this is how we grew up in public accounting firms is not showcasing value, right? It's bill, it's kind of just ask questions, be silent, here's your deliverable, here's your invoice, and clearly it's more than that. I mean, there's that relationship piece, but I just feel like, we've just grown up trying to make it seem easy behind the scenes. And here's your product. And so I think what we have to change within CAS is defining that value. What's that mean to the client in their language and making that invisible visible to them.
My first question to you is what does value really mean to both the firm and the clients? And I understand, I know you and Michelle did a lot of research on this and you came up with 5 key pillars to define value. So what are those?
Yeah, super high level industry expertise, right? It's focusing on what your industry niche is within the firm. Not that it has to just be one, but there's one or two that your team's going to be really great at. Then that leads straight into the depth of the team, right? And so we offer this that you don't have in house, and it's really hard for you to, as the client, to go out and find and hire this in house, but then you still have oversight over them. Three is proactive recommendations, right? We're here to give you best practices within your industries too. How can we realign your internal processes to help you also build and increase your margins with your own customers and clients? Or financial statement optimization and process improvement, right? It's insight, it's restructuring some of their financial information so that it's more meaningful to them. Because we find that a lot where clients have financials, but they can't see where they're making or losing money. And then the last is presenting and explaining their data proactively from an advisory standpoint that allows them to make their strategic decisions faster, right? That's what we're tasked with. How are we helping them proactively make those decisions? That value there, and if you can take that and sum that up for your firm and your clients, that's one piece of it.
The last one really hits home with me as a small business owner. You know, back in the day when my CPA would just send me financial statements, I'd be like, I don't understand these really. I don't know where I'm really at with cash flow. So I kind of just tossed them aside and say I'd look at them later, and I never did. So really having those one-on-one where you're going over the data so that clients can truly understand it is of immense value. That's how I work with my CPA now. That's how I always want to work. I never want to go back to financial statements being emailed to me. Just doesn't work. Just doesn't work. There's
It
no
doesn't
value in
work.
that for me.
Well, and that's not the strategic relationship piece
Correct.
of it either, right? And so it's let's dive into this to see where you are losing or making money and what we can do to make those changes. And just a few examples of that is multiple revenue streams for one client. We had a client that thought that they were making a ton of money in this new revenue stream they started a year and a half ago, and it comes to find out they're losing money. And it was almost like a tearful conversation because they had spent so much time, but it was like, okay, how do we pivot and what information can we provide you to be able to pivot?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's just important that firms learn to say this out loud. They need to say out loud, "We make it look really easy, but there's an immense amount of value, and here are the reasons why we're giving you so much value or which were the pillars you just went over." So, to me, in this first step, the key takeaway really is don't downplay the complexity, be transparent and talk about the effort and the expertise behind what you're doing so that your fee is validated. Would you agree with that?
I do agree with that, but I think that there's two pieces to this, like saying it out loud and this whole value proposition is how you're doing that with prospects versus how you're doing that with existing clients. And so we'll get into that, but I do just want to set that stage for those two buckets because that's different, right?
Yeah, good differentiation. Yeah, I overlooked that. So yeah, we will get into that. So let's move on to step 2. So prospect analysis, value from minute 1. So when should CAS leaders, CAS firms be conveying that value begins? My guess is it's at that prospect analysis level. Is that what happens?
It is. Yeah. So when we do a prospect analysis, and we'll do a podcast because I love the whole prospect analysis piece of it. But that when you're getting into their financials in advance of sending them a proposal, engaging them on any level, right? You're getting into their financials, you're understanding what is right with their financials, what's wrong. And when we put a proposal together, we come to the meeting with here's two or three of things that we've already identified. They're like, wow, you've already identified this out of the gate. Absolutely. And so it's bringing those industry expertise, insightful questions about their industry, about their business model. And so, I mean, it's kind of a no brainer once that you open that gate to them to substantiate that fee and provide that value out of the gate.
Yeah. So let's do a little bit more question and answer because again, people are going to be wondering what the next step is. What do you do before sending the proposal?
So before that's the assessment on the client data, right?
You're
So
requesting their GL and you're doing all that stuff.
requesting access to their GL platform. That is correct.
Gotcha.
Because we want, and that's a whole pricing conversation, right? Because you want to come out of the gate knowing what you're getting into, fixed fee pricing, but the value piece of this is that advisory. And so coming out of the gate from that advisory value perspective, reviewing their financials, we dig into absolutely every account on the income statement, on the balance sheet, so that we know as much as we can about that client.
So the key takeaway from this step is that that first impression is value. We already see your world, and here's how we're going to make it better. Is the message? Would you agree with that?
Yep.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so let's go to the next one. A case study, like showing the impact. Can you give a concrete example that clients can relate to when you're really trying to sell them on the value? A case study.
Yes. So, case study on value, kind of going back to that, just there was a roofing company and they expanded into new services, right? And so, the way that their financial statements were structured, when you start thinking about vertical versus horizontal and how you can start to see those gross margins. So, everything was just embedded in multiple accounts and not in the right buckets. So, coming in from an advisory perspective and revamping their financials because that's the first and foremost, right? These have to be useful. They have to provide insights. If they're not providing insights, it's not useful. So restructuring. Yeah,
Agreed.
restructuring.
And it really does go back to that aha moment for business owners. A case study is such a great way to do that. I mean, I talk about this in marketing all the time. So much more impact if it's a client saying how great you are and how much value you offer over you just on your website saying how much value you offer. Value isn't a report, it's the decision it unlocks. You've said
And
that before, and
like,
I like that.
yeah, and to this case study point, we just worked with a firm this last couple weeks too. Excuse me. We just worked with a client, a firm in the last couple weeks building these case studies, but it was interviewing the firm on what they did for a client. And the case studies that you can have by industry even resonates even more to a prospect, right? It's, hey, we're in your lane. We understand your business. Here's how we helped this dental practice. Here's how we helped this nonprofit, whatever that is. And you're making it tangible because I think what happens is when you go and you're selling these services, the clients don't really understand what they're buying or
Right.
they're going to pay
Until
for.
you put it into perspective by providing a case study that resonates with them.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Agreed.
So having a case study, but then identifying two or three industry niches and having a case study for each of those.
Agreed. Agreed. Great to have that in your arsenal. I wanted to move on to step 4 here, which is proactive advisory. So can we talk about proactive recommendations? For example, what qualifies as being proactive? I think probably people don't know what that means.
Well, when we talked about proactive. We're talking about, what money are you leaving on the table, right? What are your competitors or people in your industry doing differently that have higher margins? Or they're getting paid faster, or their terms with their customers and vendors are different than what you have, right? And so there's a lot of just advisory within those proactive pieces where you can just, they're quick fixes, right? Quick recommendations, and you're giving that to your clients to make faster decisions and pivot based on their industry as well.
Here's another good question for you because I think we all know that accountants don't tend to see themselves as salespeople, and I don't think they're comfortable with that. So, how do they upsell without feeling pushy?
Yeah, so that is a good question. So when we come into a client, what we want to into a prospect especially is we want to understand what is it that you aren't getting, right? What is it that you feel like is a dream that you wish you can get from a report or whatever advisory deliverable that looks like? Just tell us what you think that you're not getting that you would like. In addition to that, we also always ask what is working, right? Because you don't want to come in and think that you're creating value, but then also take something away that they thought was very valuable and was working, and you didn't take the time to stop ask that question as well. So custom reporting, right? Because so many clients are just tied into the typical reports that come out of the system. So how can you really step in and offer that value proposition there as well? And doing some demos and just saying, let's look at this, because it doesn't mean that everything out of the gate is going to be what sticks and that's what's going to be what's right for the client. It's because there's also that piece of you give too much information and it's not valuable, right? So it's really finding that balance of the information and the deliverable and the value within that, not what you, the firm, thinks is valuable, but what your client thinks is valuable.
Well, and I like the idea of a demo too. Show them the outcomes, and with the outcomes come clarity. And we all want clarity. It just makes it easier to make a decision on purchasing advisory services. Oh, let's go to number 5 here. Scope that sells is how we have this termed. So proposals and repricing. How do we convey value without sounding like we're padding the bill?
Yeah. And I love this topic because this is for prospects and existing clients too, right? So when you're repapering or you're sending over a new engagement letter and statement of work, we have designed a statement of work within our Infinite Ties community that's available to our community that is overly done. And we have firms say, this is too much. And we're like, I know, intentionally. It's intentionally too much. But you know what? We're going to take our clients, our new clients, our existing clients through this is what we do for you on a monthly basis, a weekly basis, an annual basis, advisory. And so it's intentionally overly done to convey that value. Because if we're not putting it there and we just have one line item in their engagement letter or on their statement of work and we're like, and that's $5,000, it's just not good enough anymore.
I don't think there's any harm in over explaining. I mean, I think that's what people want, especially when they're paying fees at that level. Over explaining is exactly what they need. It just segues into my next questions. What about fee conversations? Do you have any tips or anything to say about fee conversations and how those should go?
I mean, I think with that statement of work, it's pretty well laid out, and so in that, and again, we'll do multiple podcasts on pricing and the buckets that go into that. But in the statement of work, it's just the scope is so clearly defined. Having the fee conversation becomes easier once you have shown and conveyed that value. When they see the fee, it's not a shock as much because you went through 3 pages or whatever, you selected out of the statement of work to substantiate and explain
Yeah.
what they were going to get for that fee.
Yeah. I mean, key takeaway for me here is the more clearly you explain the machine, the more reasonable the price becomes to the prospect or the client you're upselling to. I mean, we all do this. We all go online and we research. We're gathering information ourselves. Give them the information up front, over explain, let them know what they're getting. And then there is a reasonableness that's applied to the fee at that point.
Right.
All right.
Right.
Let's move into number 6 here, which is client success documentation. I have to admit, I wasn't really sure what this was when I first read it. How do we prove value over time is what the question we're trying to answer. And you're saying that's through what you're calling a client success doc.
Yeah, we love this. Michelle and I did this years and years ago, but it's having kind of a living document that you have for the entire team, right? Every time you feel like you have a win, every time you found something that was wrong or they had a duplicate payment or you gave them advice on some internal controls or we talked about revamping their terms for their customers and clients. Any type of win that you can find or that your team can find goes into this document, and your team is also incented to put items into this document, right? It's part of their annual goals. But when you have this client success document, taking that quarterly, semi annually, or annually, and bringing all that information together and sitting down with your client and say, we have a semi annual meeting, an annual meeting. We just wanted to recap how we felt like the year went and would love to get your input. And when you present it to the client in that fashion, we have clients that say, I forgot about all of that. I didn't realize, yes, you guys did do that all year,
Kind of your
right?
evidence file. It's like all the information you've gathered throughout the year that you're presenting, like, I think of it as I watch a lot of crime drama, so my mind went to evidence file. But, I mean, that's what it sounds like to me.
It is. It's like, when did we refer you to the tax accountant or to a different, as your trusted advisor, we referred you to a different expert. But all of those things just come together. And that at the end of the year is a really good value recap of, yep, you guys did do a lot for me because it's easy to not remember and not to put it in the client's face. We're saying put it in the client's face,
Yeah.
present it to them.
For sure, absolutely. This leads me into number 7, which I think was really important. It's communication rhythm. I guess that comes from being a content and communications expert. You really need to put a cadence around all of this and make sure you follow that cadence. So what's like the perfect rhythm for
Yep.
communication?
Right. And the communication piece is really, I think, communication relationship, right? We talked about that's the one thing that AI should never, 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 never replace is that relationship. So this cadence rhythm is so important to just be in front of the clients all the time, right? So with our clients, we'd have standing weekly meetings. Maybe they're 15 minutes, maybe they're 30 minutes. This is we're in the weeds, right? We know what's coming up for the week. Here are the deadlines. Here's cash flow. Here's what we need. Here's payroll, whatever that is. That's in the weeds. Then that monthly financial meeting, that should be either face to face or on Zoom too, face to face, but that's higher level strategic, right? That's not in the weeds. This is here's proactively strategic conversations. Where do we need to go from here? Because we've already been in the weeds and you've seen your financials and we can explain those too. But this is a strategic
Yeah.
planning meeting.
Yeah.
So that's important. And then the semi-annually, annual meetings of where do we go next year? What are we aligning? What are the goals for the next year to 2 to 3 years? Because those are going to change every year to 2 to 3 years. And just again, getting in front of them. So weekly, monthly, semi-annual, annual.
It's a good cadence. It's a lot of meetings, which means an ample amount of time, which is good. You want to keep that communication rhythm going, but how do you keep the team engaged through all of that?
That's a really good question. They are so like our team was always so invested and they just, it made it nicer because those weekly meetings to me cut down on the phone calls and the emails that would come in that you would have to respond to
I didn't even
the
think
client.
about that. That's true. That's true.
Right. And so the team would say, we have all these questions. And so they would always be eager to get on these calls because there were things that needed to be resolved. But then we got our clients to the point where they'd say, hey, I'm sending over this email, but I know we're going to speak in 2 days. So it's just a topic, which is so nice because now our team's not pick up, put down on all of these clients. They can then just take what was in that bucket or that came in emails. And then we have that conversation on a weekly basis. The team actually love it. And then we always invite the team, the entire team, to the monthly financials meeting too, even just from a strategic, because that's how they're going to learn
Sure.
and hear the conversation.
And be able to have those conversations with the CAS clients themselves down the road. I mean, you're basically
Right.
mentoring up by doing that as well.
Exactly.
All right, so let's jump into 8, the next to last step we have here. Don't undersell the hard stuff. So I know you said before one trap is underselling the work because you're so efficient. We just said it at the beginning of this podcast. What's your response to that? Like, what's some good advice you can give to get people past that?
right? I mean, it's the hard don't undersell the hard stuff. That's understanding your client, right? That's understanding their financials and getting in because we want clients to say yes too fast, right? And it's kind of like pausing, understanding the value that you're going to bring, especially with the harder projects or the bigger projects that are going to take a lot of time. And this is like as an example, you have a client that says, I need to move from cash to accrual. Okay, well, that seems basic. We're going to charge you X amount of dollars. No, no, no. Let's back up. How much information do you want? Do you want us to do that just at the end of the year? Do you want us to go back last year, the last 2 years, and convert cash to accrual for every month of the last 2 years? Like that's a different price point, right? And so it's really just pausing, understanding that what the value that you're bringing to the client with those bigger projects and not undersell that. And you come back and say, it's all of this. And it is a lot. We got to go look at all your payroll reports. We're looking at all your invoices. We're looking at timing of all of the things. And it's almost like over communicating,
Yeah.
overly stating what it is to
But
convey
you're
that.
building your value story. So if you do that up front, then it becomes almost your stump speech, right? So you have to put in that work to build that value story. And then it's almost like you can pull it off the shelf and relay that to every client down the line. Not to mention that provides common language that you can cascade through your staff. So they're all telling the same value story as well. I think that's an important point to hit. So let's move into our final step here, which is 9. So the 7-day challenge is define your value. We talked about those 4 pillars right up front there. Your prospect analysis template. So your findings plus your improved statement, correct? Did I say that
Correct.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
Your case study. So you're bringing in the value that another client has experienced so that can actually resonate with an existing client that you're trying to upsell or a prospect. Your overall detailed SOW. So over explain, put it all in there, make sure that you have a proper proposal and a proper price in there. And you're going to over explain because you want to make sure they get the value at the end of the day and not just see the price. Your client success document. So that is your evidence file throughout the year. You're going to build that throughout the year so you can sit down with the clients and show them all the value they're receiving. Staff can hear it too. Your cadence calendar. So those weekly, monthly, mid-year, and then annual meetings, which you made a really great point about that. At first, I'm thinking that's going to take a lot of time, but it's actually going to save time because we all know that firms get 1,000 emails. And if they've got IMs now, they get 1,000 IMs. It's going to reduce all of that into these very organized meetings, was a great point. And then team incentive, we didn't really talk about that. Do you want to speak to that? So we've talked about doing all of these things and having these meetings and keeping team members engaged. What is to the team incentive to make sure they stay engaged with the whole process?
Yeah, and this is part of adding this to their annual goals, right? So they are tasked with updating 3 to 5 of those client success documents, right? And so they're incented to do that as well. And I mean, what a great goal, right? Because n- you're now, I think, as a team, you're also advocating for yourself. Here's what I did for this client, right? So now you're advocating for yourself, but you're just adding that to their annual goals as well.
Wonderful. And we will have the 7-step challenge in the show notes or the description below, whatever you want to call it, so you can actually take that and put that into action right away. We hope you found this helpful. I found it helpful. And just from a small business perspective, Christine, anything that you think that we missed that you want to cover?
I don't think so. I think,
Gotcha.
just that what we opened with is just the make the invisible visible.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree completely. So we want to thank you for listening again this week. We will come back again with another cast packed episode. That is our promise to you. And this is Fancastic.